Poppins Returns is the sequel to the 1964 Disney classic Mary Poppins, which is in turn based on a series of books written by P.L. Travers. This sequel is written by David McGee, directed by Rob Marshall, and stars Emily Blunt, Lin-Manuel Miranda, and Ben Whishaw.
I honestly can't remember why we kept most of this stuff to begin with.
Don't you remember that kite? We used to love flying that with Mother and Father.
Those days are long behind me.
A few decades after her original visit to 17 Cherry Tree Lane, Mary Poppins returns once again to help the Banks children. The film opens with Michael, now an adult and a widower, learning that he's behind on payments for his loan that he took out on 17 Cherry Tree Lane. And now the house that he grew up in and his children are currently growing up in is in danger of being repossessed. 'Cause that's a job for Mary Poppins, right?
Mary.
Poppins, you came back.
You seem hardly to have aged at all.
Really? One never discusses a woman's age, Michael. Would have hoped I taught you better.
I wanted to love this movie. I really did. While I have no nostalgic connection to Mary Poppins, as I really wasn't shown it as a child because it's not one of my mom's favorite Disney movies by any means, I have a lot of admiration for the story. Before I had even seen the original movie for the first time, I watched 2013's Saving Mr. Banks, which, if you don't know, is a film that Disney did about the making of Mary Poppins. It's the story of the battles, if you will, between Walt Disney and P.L. Travers to get the rights to make her books into the original movie. And without giving too much away about that story, in that story you learn what P.L. Travers' intent was for the original story and how Disney and her reached compromises to have it be the magical story that it is, but still with that heartfelt message. And Saving Mr. Banks is one of my all-time favorite Disney movies to this day. But yeah, before I had even seen the original movie, I knew about that. And then in high school, actually, myself, junior consultant Mike Adams, and producer Amanda all worked on our school's musical, which in Amanda and I senior year was Mary Poppins. So we've probably seen a version of that story about 150 times, at least. So we definitely are all familiar with it. And about 5 days before I saw Mary Poppins Returns, I purchased and watched the original movie from 1964. And I loved the original movie so much. It really was... I was blown away by how impressive the music was, the acting was, and especially considering that movie was made in the 60s, I was blown away by how good the special effects were. There's special effects in that movie that, because obviously computers didn't exist in the 60s, I don't know how they did. Real Disney magic. And the problem, I guess what is at the core of my issues with Mary Poppins Returns is that while as its own kids movie, it's mostly fine, it's an incredibly bad sequel to Mary Poppins. I have two thoughts before I give what will be essentially a spoiler warning. Both of them negative. One, Emily Blunt can't sing. There's a couple songs where her as Mary Poppins, she's singing and she sounds okay, but for the most part, she's a terrible singer. I really don't like her singing voice that much, and big shock, she does not hold a candle to Julie Andrews, the original Mary Poppins. And two, this movie is essentially a beat-for-beat retelling of the original Mary Poppins. It's a bad case of sequelitis. while yes, it's technically a continuation of the story in the fact that now the Banks children are the adults in this situation and it's later on in their lives, it has an eerily similar flow of story to the original movie. Now, guys, before I go any further, just in case if anyone is concerned for having this movie spoiled, I'm gonna go into spoilers here. I'm gonna talk about specific plot points, specific musical numbers. If you do not want this spoiled, skip to this point in the video to just see our final thoughts. But yeah, 3, 2, 1. So right off the bat, as I said earlier, this is essentially a beat-for-beat retelling of the original story, just with the Banks children as the adults now. Every song sequence is just a lesser version of the original song that you know and love. After Mary Poppins flies in, which again wasn't really triggered by anything all that important. I guess Michael is a little bit cross with the kids because he's freaking out that he's going to lose his house. But at least in the original, the kids were rowdy. They were disruptive. They were rude. In this one, the kids are mostly fine. If anything, in the film states this, they're a little too uptight as kids go. Yeah, Mary Poppins helps you solve your debt problems and teach you how to imagine things. And the first song sequence with Mary Poppins and the kids is Something in a Bath, and I believe the number is called Can You Imagine That?, which they have a magical bath. And that song is a lesser version of Spoonful of Sugar. It's the song that's supposed to introduce the kids to the magic of Mary Poppins. But Spoonful of Sugar in the original, the magic is small. It's tiny little impressive things like making the blocks spell her name or making the clothes fold themselves. And this one, it's, let's dive into a bath and swim with dolphins. I'm not kidding. Swimming with dolphins is a thing that happens in this. And the CG dolphins look horrible. And pirate ships and all these things. And you miss the point of if you're gonna retell this story, you've already missed the point of that first song sequence. It's supposed to slowly introduce them to the magic, not bombard them. And then they go into a sequence I really enjoyed where Michael is up in the attic looking for certificates of shares that his father owned in the bank, which will easily allow him to pay back the bank what he owes on the house. And in that scene, there's a song sequence called A Conversation, where Michael is doing that kind of talk singing thing that movies do, but it's where he's essentially having a conversation of like, why did you leave me? I can't handle this. And it really is a genuinely moving scene a la the original. And that was a really impressive scene. And then they have a lesser version of Jolly Holiday, where Mary, the kids, and Lin-Manuel Miranda's character, whose name, if I'm not mistaken, was Jack, and Jack is Bert if he was a light guy. I'm forgetting the name, but he turns on the lights in London at night. And they go into this bowl, and they have a song number about going to a musical house that's supposed to be Jolly Holiday, but not good. And then they have another song number, something, which I don't even remember the name, but it was something about judging a book by their cover. And you can tell that song, if it's because it's following the beat for beat, that song is supposed to be supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, but not good or fun. Though I do have to give them credit. They did use hand-drawn animated animals in all of the sequences where there's animals in that scene, very similar to how Jolly Holiday has all hand-drawn animals. Because I definitely do think that if Disney had used like 3D animated animals, I hope we all would have collectively said, no, that's not what you should do in a sequel to Mary Poppins. So, my rant, to start it off, I do have to say, one, I guess spoilers for the core message in Saving Mr. Banks as I go on. And in the original Mary Poppins, there is arguably no villain in the movie. What Saving Mr. Banks teaches you is that, well, yes, the father is mean or whatever you want to say. He isn't a villain. He's just lost his sense of fun, and he's lost, I guess, some of the value of his family because he's so caught up in his job. And Mary Poppins teaches him to not take life so seriously, spend more time and value your children. And there isn't really a villain in the original. In this one, we get a cartoony Colin Firth playing a banker who doesn't care that the Banks family, that Michael Banks works for the bank in the bank that took the loan out for him, and doesn't care that there's a family involved and that there's kids. He just wants to make more money, and he's gonna get it one way or another. Mary Poppins does not lend itself to having a cartoon, literally mustachioed villain. And in this Jolly Holiday sequence that I'm talking about, after the two musical numbers, while they were at this music hall, or whatever it was called, they met a wolf character who's the owner. And then the wolf character, who's voiced by Colin Firth. Because, who needs subtlety? Who needs to, subtly make illusions? Let's give him the same voice, the same mannerisms, and just make him a cartoon wolf. Starts taking toys from the nursery in real life, saying, we want to steal your house from you. And, again, who needs, subtle, quiet moments when you can have literally spelling out what the kids are afraid is going to happen to their house? And then there's a chase sequence. It's the wolf character is in a steam-powered train, and then the kids are chasing him in a horse-drawn carriage. Because, that's what Mary Poppins needs, is an action chase sequence. This subtle story about learning to take life a little less seriously really needs a chase sequence. And I'm sitting there and I turn to my mother, and she disagrees with me in this, but I said to my mother, P.L. Travers and Walt Disney are both rolling over in their graves during that sequence because it was disgusting. That did not belong in the sequel to Mary Poppins. And the movie continues, again, with this weird mix of scenes I liked and scenes I really hated. There was a brilliant scene where the kids are talking about how they miss their mother now that she's dead. And Mary, and this is the only time I actually liked Emily Blunt singing. She sings a song, I believe it's called Where Lost Things Go, where she talks about how the mother's not necessarily gone. She is everywhere. She's in everything, looking down on you, smiling. I would just personally go listen to that song, and you'll understand what I'm saying, but the lyrics in that song are a very Mary Poppins way of teaching kids to deal with death. It's imaginative, but it acknowledges that sad things happen. And that scene was brilliant. Then they have a scene where they go see Meryl Streep, who's supposed to be Mary Poppins' cousin, to fix a bowl. And you have a very weird sequence, which is, if you've seen the original movie, essentially the Uncle Albert scene, but with a musical number and Meryl Streep's singing voice, which isn't very good if anyone's seen her sing ever. There are things I do enjoy in this movie, and I'm just going to list them because I feel like I was just going way too far in the negative for a little bit there. One, I really do like Lin-Manuel Miranda in this. I know I've made fun of him in the past. I think he's a bit of he has quite an ego, but he's trying his best with this role. I really do enjoy, even though it's nowhere near as good as Step in Time, I like their replacement for Step in Time, which is a song called Trip a Little Light Fantastic. The choreography was brilliant. It was really impressive. I do think there was a few too many jump cuts, whereas the original held on shots so you could take in the choreography a little bit better. And one thing I really do have to give them credit for in this movie, just all throughout, is the homages paid to classic filmmaking. First of all, there's an overture at the beginning of this. I had read a few reviews not read a few reviews, but seen that some people really weren't liking it. And when I saw that there was an overture, with oil paintings of really the film you're about to see, but exactly similar to how they do it in the beginning of the movie, of the first movie, I was like, oh, that's really cool. You're acknowledging that this is based on a classic movie. Then the rest of it didn't go so well, but I gave them credit for that. Trip a Little Light Fantastic was a wonderful moment. And then there was one scene in particular that legitimately, even through all the crap in this movie, almost brought me to tears. And it's a scene before the stupid climax with the race against the time to get to the bank so they don't foreclose the house. There was a scene where it's Michael and Mary Poppins standing on the staircase talking, and he's talking about how life's kind of fallen apart for him since his wife has left. And faintly in the distance, you can hear the song A Man Has Dreams from the original movie. And I was like, that's brilliant. You're referencing the original in a way that doesn't feel painfully obvious, but you're acknowledging the emotional weight that the A Man Has Dreams number has in the original, and two, just the emotional weight of this scene. That scene had a lot of emotional weight, which this movie needs more of. And that was a brilliant scene, but it was definitely a mixed bag of things I really hated and things I really did enjoy.
Everything is possible.
Even the impossible. Off we go.
As its own film, Mary Poppins Returns is a perfectly fine kids movie. It has some great music, some really enjoyable dance numbers, and just a fun tone. But as a sequel to the original Mary Poppins, it fails to understand what makes that story so unique. A 3 out of 5.